So, let's start with hello, everyone, and welcome to our 8th event in our special online meetup series hosted by the Web3 Developers Underground. Before we will dive in, let me briefly introduce you to our community. We are a community of Web3 developers and builders founded on the open source values by Shaoli Redjuan and Roy Yosherov. Since our inception 3 years ago, we've consistently hosted in person events, bringing together some of the brightest technical minds in the space. As many of you may know, we've recently expanded to online meetups, and we're committed to delivering top tier technical content to our global Web3 community. We're thrilled to have all of you with us today. To stay in the loop for future events and updates, please make sure to follow us on all platforms: X, Luma, Meetup, YouTube, Telegram, and more. A special thank you to our community sponsor, MasterKey VC, an early stage venture capital specializes in infrastructure and deep tech across all Web3 ecosystem. With a team of 16 world-class cryptographers and several technical experts led by our managing partner, Shaoli Redjuan, MasterKey operates across all major global crypto hubs. And now, without further ado, I'm honored to pass the mic to Bonnie and Glupta, the founders of Full Sail. Bonnie, Glupta, the mic is yours.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Feel free to share a screen, and I'll drop down.
Okay, let's see how to share the screen. Okay, cool. Can we see? Can we see your screen? Yes, cool. All right. So let's get into it. We're behind the project Full Sail. We're building on Sui, and we're going to kind of walk through our kind of story on why we are so bullish on DeFi winning on Sui. Very excited to be here. So before we get into it, a little kind of like background on us and a little background on Full Sail. So my name is Glupta. I'm the private key founder. I'm kind of like the lead architect behind Full Sail, like overseeing the financial and tech engineering. I built previously a self-repaying, non-liquidating loans platform on Arbitrum. So it was pretty deep in the EVM world before coming into Sui. So I've kind of like a context of like other contract design spaces. I was a CTO on that project, and but now I consider myself a post dev. So this is like the first project where I'm not the one writing the lines of code itself, but I'm much more on the product side, and and so that's important context. So the lens I have, I look from like kind of value props more so now than like getting into the deep nitty gritty. But like I work closely with our technical team. And my background, I studied computer science at Yale. That's where I first came across Bitcoin. I was building like a distributed computing system there, and and then so it was a natural progression into Bitcoin. This is like 2013, so this is like a little bit while ago. I wish I held on to more Bitcoins than I actually did. But and then like so I was excited about Bitcoin, but I was like, oh, okay, this is cool, but like I can't build with it. And then when Ethereum came around, that's when I got more excited, because I'm like, oh, wow, smart contracts. Like now this is super interesting because there's a whole design space. But then as you get into like building on Ethereum, you're like, wait a second, this is like a huge step back. And we'll go into some of those reasons why I feel like a step back from like, deving in the Web2 world. And then finally, DeFi summer came around in 2021. Then there's like a whole kind of like emergence of awesome financial kind of things that we can build. That's when I started building out the loans platform. And then soon after that, I got lured into Sui, which we'll go into. And so, I studied at Yale, did some particle physics in the beginning before I went into tech full time. Yeah, I'm good.
Hey guys, I'm Bonnie. I'm the public key founder of Full Sail Finance. I'm in charge of adoption, growth, partnerships. I lead here at Full Sail. We take product and distribution equally as seriously. So everyone on the team takes their jobs very seriously, because we think really great things can can be hidden if they don't have the proper distribution. So I make sure that we have a very, very competitive team, and it's doing very well. And currently, yeah, my background is I'm at like a Johns Hopkins like environmental public health researcher. I was an environmental consultant, and I thought that would be my dream job. And then I just realized anyone could do my job, and and so I started my own business with Bitcoin miners as an energy consultant to help them use market-based solutions to reduce their costs and also reuse their energy. And while I was there, I met Akshay, Glepta, and a bunch of other people, and I liked the community that they're around. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to help these guys out. And I farmed in like the entire the conference that we were at for them in like 4 hours, and brought in a bunch of investors. And one of them said that if Akshay hired me, he'd back my salary for a year. So that's the beginning of us building together. Sometime later, we became co-founders of Full Sail, and we are really great complements for each other. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about like starting a company, I recommend finding someone who's really good and complementary to what you're really good at.
Yeah, so I like to say I'm good. I'm good at talking to computers. She's good at talking to people.
I'm like a Glepta translator, but like you guys seem pretty advanced, so I don't know how much translation you'll need this time.
For sure. All right, so like the what we're gonna cover in this talk will be like why Sui is better than other general purpose chains or even specialized chains. Honestly, why? So why like, and this is like shows the reasoning for why we chose to build on Sui. So after like the last project where I learned a lot about how DeFi is awesome, but the shortcomings of EVM, then it's like okay, we had like there's this famous kind of like guy at KOL, a project lead of Aftermath at Sui. His name is AirTX. He lured me in because he was able to show me the way of why Sui is impressive, and and Sui is a good example of something that is like very, very good at like being great at technical, but like they have a lot of opportunities to improve on the adoption side, which is why it hasn't been kind of like hit as much adoption as it should, although it's early. And that's why we need people like Bonnie and myself, like where we're in this talk here today, to try to like onboard more and more gigabrains like yourselves into Sui.
Yeah, Sui is actually a full stack blockchain, and we'll get into that later. But they're they're the product people of Facebook and Meta, so they're really I like if you can compare Web3 to the early .com era, there's a few companies that break through and last, like Google, and I definitely see Sui as positioned to do that, not just because of their relationships, having experience building for 3.5 billion people, but because of their product vision.
Yeah, and it's like really cool how much like open source technology has come out of Facebook. I just want to comment on that, right? Like we have React on the front end. We have I forgot which database. I think you guys probably know. There's like a database that's like really popular now that came from Facebook, and even Move and DM and Sui and Aptos. All these are like from Facebook, or even like open source like models like Llama, right? So a lot of good stuff, and you really see it when you're building in Sui that you get like the feeling you got when you're building in Web 2. Like you have like a much more like fleshed out like tooling set. Some of it is still early, so it needs to be more fleshed out, but like you can feel the quality that it was built by a team that is was used to building Web 2 for billions of people. So we'll get to that. Now the next topic we'll talk on is return on emissions. This is basically the metric by which we look at everything in DeFi. It's quite simple. We'll get into it, but it's like the ratio of how much money is coming in versus how much we're spending. And then we'll go through the evolution of decentralized exchanges, right? Like the first OGs were like from Uniswap. So it's not been too long. It's only been a few years, and we've gone through multiple iterations as we've learned from each one. So what's really important in crypto is like, obviously it's important to think about smart contracts and tech, but we have to also give the same kind of respect and energy towards the financial engineering side, where a lot of this like is still kind of new. So we'll go over some of those ideas that we think about in our team. and our team is like just as important as dev is quant. So we'll get into that stuff.
Yeah, let's just jump in.
Cool. All right. So what does modern DeFi actually need, right? Like these are kind of some of like the principles that we think are really important. And this is the kind of things that like kind of guided our decision making, learning from our previous projects as well on what matters. So like parallelization, right? Like a classic example I like to talk about is in Solana when Trump coin got launched and that congested the entire network. So like imagine if like I'm building a project and like and like my project's UX is being affected by another project's having a lot of traffic. That's not like a really ideal scenario, right? This definitely happens. In Ethereum we have like ways of working around it. Like you have basically you have like L2s that come on, but like that kind of can compromise the security and stuff. But even in Solana, right, that's supposed to be built for like high throughput and all that, and even that has these problems. So we need to have parallelization. We're used to this in Web2. We don't work on single thread computers, so we expect that level of ability in a chain that we build like high throughput, high performing DeFi on. Fast and predictable finality, right? You should know when like the things will be settled, right? It shouldn't be variable and it shouldn't take long, right? Block times are yes, in TradFi it was like days, so that is definitely progress. But like when it comes to it's like it can be like hours in Bitcoin. Like for true finality, it's like minutes in Ethereum. But we need to be like very fast if we want true like atomic composability. We want to be sure that like the last thing happened before we moved on to the next thing. So we need to know how fast. Like it needs to be fast and it needs to be predictable. Secure, expressive, smart contract language. This will get it again. All these things will get into a little bit more deeper, but it's important to this contract that we're writing has to be is very sensitive, right? You don't want to have silly things that you have to like test for or like that can cause like hacks, right? And so we need to like write in a language that is built for blockchains. And so we'll go into why Sui's flavor of move in our opinion is the best programming language like written in such a way that it's like stupid proof, whereas like other languages like EVM or Rust.
It's just early, so I always say like thank you to EVM for creating the groundwork for DeFi, but it's just a much like Sui is so much more advanced. There's actually, because of these security like requirements that are designed for, just like you can't even write the code unless you put those in. It won't work. So hundreds of billions of dollars have been like hacked on EVM that are impossible to do on Sui Move.
Yeah. And here's another thing that a data point that I find fascinating is like, you're like, oh, EVM is like the standard, right? It's been established, but there is less devs that write in Solidity or EVM than there are devs at Facebook. Just to give you some perspective on like how early we are and how little like penetration we have in the dev like market, so to speak. So like there is still a huge scope of if there is a better language or better kind of tooling that's like a magnitude better, which we think is like the case with Move, that all these new devs that are onboarding that are starting out new in crypto, they can just skip EVM and Solidity and go into a better language. And so yeah, and so like for even in TradFi though, it's like interesting because you had Cobalt that kind of stuck around for mainframes, but that because that had it like hit like kind of like like escape velocity, but we have not hit that with EVM or Solidity. So it's very ripe to have a much better language. So let's move, and we'll go into why it's much better. Okay, this is what makes this object-oriented piece, I think, is actually like one of the key things that sets Sui apart from any other chain, and why like it's such a critical piece for why we wanted to build on Sui. Like EVM, Solana, even Aptos for that matter, they are all account based. So you are at the end of the day fully restricted by that account. You can't have independent actions. This goes back to the parallelization piece. You can't have independent actions, and so like because of the way the language is written, and it prevents scalability. So if we switch from account based to object oriented, that's kind of like as akin to in the Web 2 when we went from C and Java to like C++, and that unlocked a whole kind of I guess design space like coding paradigm. You know,
Oh, you're having fun over here.
well, it's like really fun like having. I started on like Avalanche, which was EVM. Then I migrated to Arbitrum, and it's the same thing as EVM. And I was like writing there, and then I would switch over to Solana for a bit. We were doing some stuff there, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting, but this also has complication. But man, when you switch over to Move, especially Sui Move, and what's cool is like we're able to onboard our backend devs on our team into Sui Move, like who guys that hadn't written in contracts, smart contracts before, but they're really good at like C++, backend, like Golang and all that, and a lot of Sui Move is extension from Rust. So if you're familiar with Rust, that is an easy upgrade. So if you're familiar with object oriented and Rust, then it's an easy way to transition to Sui Move. But those guys like really like in less than a week were able to feel comfortable writing logic. Whereas with EVM Solidity, there was more ramping up and like more things you have to like think about to like reentrancy and tax and stuff. Anyways, and then like scalability and gas efficiency. So that's really important, right? Like we touched on in the previous slide, that like or touched on the previous point, like you need predictable and fast finality, but you also need predictable gas as well. You can't have like transactions that are spiking in gas. That's not like suitable for like a high complex DeFi infrastructure. Cool. That was a lot of stuff, but now I think it'll be good to dive a little bit more into like the Sui's architecture that allows for this, right? So like I mentioned, move-based smart contract language, object-centric data structure, and these two pieces as well, which are pretty cool. So like you kind of like split focuses in like how the system works. So at the execution level, as well as separating out the things that a validator and client do a bit better. These kind of like kind of design structures has drastic kind of efficiencies that are created. Okay, so let's go over why Move is the best smart contract language to write in. All right, so Move over Solidity. All right, so safer by design. It's baked into the logic that you can't double spend tokens, you can't accidentally override state, and you can't write reentrancy vulnerabilities. The amount of times that like reentrancies have caused hacks, as she mentioned, is crazy. And you have to like literally write the modifier to prevent reentrancies. You have to really think about these things in integration testing. And I don't have to even we don't have to do anything because that's defined by default. It is more kind of.
How many dev cycles do you think that saves to have all this based off of the things you had to do in EVM?
Three times faster conservatively.
Yeah.
Than writing in EVM conservatively.
Because it's already all these things are already baked in. So that also protects you from
it also reduces like our cost and time on audits. And something that would take us a month from end to end in EVM maybe we can push through in a week because we don't have as much as a dev, you realize in a production when you're writing an enterprise production level like code, like honestly, like maybe like the actual designing and writing of the logic is like I don't know 20-30%. Most of it is testing actually, and then also like when you make a breaking change or like a significant change or a refactor, then it's also like mostly refreshing the test coverage. So it's like if you actually have less things to test, that radically improves your dev cycles. That's kind of like thing. And then again, it's just DeFi. It's like, you could be doing everything right. One hack, you go to zero, right? Like, so like you got to overspend on security because like that is, the lifeblood of your protocol. You're dealing people's money. You cannot take chances. So like, what's your favorite line that you like to say? That it's unethical?
Oh, so okay. Here's some context. There used to be the common birthing method used to involve pulling children out of the womb. And there's a lot of children who became paralyzed from that because babies are delicate. And when gynecologists, researchers realized that this was causing children to become paralyzed, they went to like the conference and they said they would testify against anyone who continued to use this common practice. And it was quickly stopped. I find it unethical at this point in time to build DeFi on EVM. Because of these security risks, you need to create the safest conditions possible for people's money. And it's just simply not the safest current thing by magnitudes. Hundreds of billions, because of this safer by design, this re-entrancy things, hundreds of billions of dollars have been exploited on EVM that are impossible to do in Sui Move. It is unethical. So that's it. That's my hot take.
Yeah, it's not, once you actually think about it.
Just because like in Web3, some people are still doing it, like that doesn't mean that it's common still. That doesn't mean that you can't just easily not choose to have these vulnerabilities in your structure by just building in Sui Move.
This is a good example of thinking like first principles, right? Just because everyone else is writing in Solidity, everyone else is using EVM, doesn't mean that EVM is like.
Think for yourself.
Yeah.
Think for yourself.
And
from a business perspective, the dev cycles is crazy.
And as someone who's like hopped around missing landmine after landmine in Arbitrum, so like we were like always very like security minded and didn't have any hack issues ourselves. But like, partners you work with, you see this guy get hacked and you're like, oh no, like, it's stressful out there. And like, whereas in Sui, we have not had, they only had one like kind of major like hack at all since their inception. Like they're kind of like leading decentralized exchange. And that too, because Sui is in the earlier stages, their set of validators is not as like decentralized. So they are able to kind of like convince their validators to pause that. It was like their version of the DAO hack that like, Ethereum had in the early days. Obviously
basically it was this protocol called Cetus, and it wasn't Sui's fault. It was Cetus itself
they had an overflow. They had an overflow thing. There are certain things like, obviously not everything will be caught natively in the Move language, like overflow errors.
Wasn't it very interesting though? Wasn't it a financial mechanic error?
It was an overflow error. Basically, like, let's say the data stores can only hold like an integer up to a certain max value. And, they didn't check for that. And like when it added it up, it went over that max value, which resets and goes down to like a lower number. And so like the hacker used that kind of exploit to mismanage like, the swaps and like drain them money.
So does it have anything to do with Sui?
I mean, it does have to do with Sui Move. Like Sui Move cannot stop like overflow kind of, checks.
Okay.
So like it's not like, there's certain things.
That's not a silver bullet.
But it does. So I'm not gonna say everything is like perfect, but it does drastically reduce the scope of things that could be hacked, which is really nice. It's just like there's much less things you gotta think about. I see a question about Rust. So I would say that like what's nice is that if you're familiar with Rust, it's actually a very easy transition to Move. Move is like a more kind of opinionated, restrictive version of Rust. So it's like it uses a lot of similar syntactical kind of ideas from Rust, but Rust is more open-ended. So again, if Rust is more open-ended, Solana is more open-ended, you have more things to like mess up, like like accounting and stuff like that.
Parallelized either, right?
Yeah, again, because again, Rust and Solana and basically every other chain besides Sui is account-based. Account-based means like if my account is managed, is dealing with project A and like interacting with project A, smart contract A, how can smart contract B know that like it has to wait for smart contract A to finish before smart contract B can engage because it's account-based. It doesn't know if I'm doing multitasking or not. But if it's object-oriented, this object has everything it needs within the object. And it will know whether it's blocked or not blocked by other things. So if it's not blocked, it can go rapid fast. In fact, object A and object B, if they're not related to each other and not bothering with anything else, they can both go rapidly at their own pace. That's the
That's
parallelization.
parallelization.
Yeah. And we'll go into like that,
which is very important for financial modeling, because if you and someone else in the world execute something at the same time, you don't want there to be. So you want it to be at the same time. You want it in parallel. You don't want it to be someone gets to go in front of someone else.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into like some of these like more powerful DeFi primitives are like gonna like come onto Sui, and some already have. But like imagine if you have like a HyperLiquid, perps exchange that is like has a crazy volume. Like if that congested the chain and like sucked in all the energy, then I wouldn't want to launch a project on that chain, because I'm like, my project's UX is going to be affected by this project that's taking so much of the activity. That's a risk that they sometimes have in Solana.
It's not scalable.
It's not scalable.
It's totally not. I know it.
Yeah, and like sometimes like when you scale, like like in horizontal scaling of some chains, as you scale, it does like there's a higher risk of like collision and stuff like that. So like as you add more and more validators, basically, or add more kind of pieces to it, it creates more and more like ability of friction. It slows things down basically. And Sui is natively like you can scale up the validator set. It will not affect performance at all, because it's a DAG system. It's not a blockchain system. It doesn't have to like perpetuate all its kind of messages across. And like it can do it in an efficient way. So yeah, another thing that's really neat is like the way it's designed is that certain like these, because it's again object centric, and there's like these native resources, like specifically like things like tokens and NFTs are like really baked into the logic at a fundamental level. Whereas in like let's say the Ethereum world, there's standards that are defined by a community. Like a token is actually a contract that has the shape of there's a standard that was like submitted that everyone agrees on. It's called ERC20, and so that's the standard you have to operate by. But if you create a contract that is like doesn't have ERC20 implementations, like it's not natively like baked into the fundamental like logic of the thing. So someone could have like a different flavor of a token. Someone can have a different flavor of a token. Sometimes they might not like talk to each other properly. Things can bake. You have to like force standards, and that requires like human social coordination. Whereas like tokens and NFTs are baked in at the fundamental level, so there doesn't require like this like human coordination element at all.
That's very important.
Yeah, like
that's very important.
It's very fragile. Like EVM is very fragile. Yeah, and so and as a result, then you don't have to worry about things getting like copied or lost or things like that. Like these small things. Again, you have to have extra testing to think about that in EVM. Okay, and then like what's really cool is like you have like formal verification baked in. I remember I was getting quotes when I was building Savvy, because there's a lot of accounting that I have to go in. I have to manage like debt, like the loans platform I was talking about. That in EVM I have to manage. I have to think about like users' debt, users like this all these kind of like metrics of the accounting side, and I had to like actually like source kind of like formal verification audits. That's a cost. I don't have to even do that here because it's baked in. It's literally when you're compiling the code in Move, it automatically does that for you. So like accounting is baked in. I don't have to worry about a user having like accounting for extra funds or missing funds. Right, and like it's the way it's structured. Like like assets are always conserved, and only the owner can move an asset. And like things behave as you're supposed to. So mathematically, it's checked at the compiler level. Really, really neat, useful things. Makes my life easier. Cool. So that's So as you can tell, I'm pretty bullish on Move.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could be listening to this and like not bullish on Move at this point.
Yeah.
If anyone has any more questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box. We'll get to them.
I'll also after I go over like the why I'm bullish on Sui, I'll also give you my there's only a couple of like devil's advocate type counterpoints that I would say that are like solvable.
Yeah,
I'll go into it. Let me still go wax poetic on Sui a little bit more first.
All right, let's wax poetic.
All right, so what's nice is that's like what's like in the way that Sui design things, it has like different things that are specialized, right? So the object level, there's 3 types of objects. There is either like kind of like independent owned objects, or there is objects that could have like dependent, meaning it could have like multiple owners. It's shared around. And so by like, or like they're just immutable, like read-only assets, right? So like by defining these like objects in these three kind of categories, it makes it a lot easier to know what level of consensus or like, consensus is needed to manage those assets, right? So if it's an independent object, that object doesn't need to think about anything outside of that object. The object can just like move at its own pace and finish, and that leads to like very, very fast finality and execution. Shared objects go a little bit faster, but there's much like most of the objects end up being in the independent bucket. And so then there's only a few, there's like a few, like I think 80-20, let's use a Pareto rule, probably like 20% are shared. Those things are like, like liquidity pools, right? Like lending pools. Like these are things that are like where a lot of people are kind of interacting or the same thing, or like a perp exchange contract, or, if it's a game, then it's like, something that like everyone is interacting with. And so, this leads to like, you don't have like this, like you don't have to have a giant like global state thing to deal with. You don't have like, and so decoupling creates a lot of efficiency. Example, like, so like, token transfers, right? Minting, burning, basic swaps. So, we don't need consensus for this. Validators can just, let it rip. 0.4 seconds finality. And you can, this is like one of the things that unlocks the parallelization that we were talking about. And then, shared objects, right? Like I mentioned, things like liquidity pool, lending vaults. And so like they call their consensus narwhal and bull shark, like a bunch of like water themed naming schemes you'll see. And so this, can take, it still goes pretty quick, but it can take up to a couple of seconds. But now you're focusing on consensus on things that actually need consensus. It makes sense, but like, no other chains have that.
Yeah, wait, what other options besides EVM did you consider, and what were the main reasons for your choice?
Like Solana is always a good, because I think Solana is one of the leaders in adoption. So if you want, like, like if someone like wants to index on adoption, like which they should, right? Solana is a reasonable bet for that. However, if you look kind of like into the future, right, it's like I actually literally cannot build certain things on Solana or anywhere else that I'm building on.
Yeah, like again, going back to his. Yeah.
So if I'm building towards the future of like,
what do you think of async blockchains?
Async blockchains. What do you mean by async blockchain? Like a
near time.
Yeah. So the parallel. Do I have another? Oh, let me see. Parallel. Okay, So coming back to parallel execution, just I see he's asking to re-explain. So because we decouple, first of all, because we're object oriented, right? And now, how does object oriented lead to parallelization, right? If we have two types or three types, but like, we have like independent objects and we have shared objects. Independent objects means that those objects are kind of self-contained in order to execute. Like they don't need information outside of that object to execute. Hence, it doesn't really need like consensus or doesn't have to wait on other things in order to like complete. It can just as soon as the validator receives an independent object with like, hey, these instructions to do A to B, it can just do it. It doesn't have to like then like perpetuate and gossip across all the other validators and reach consensus. That makes it super fast. And so you can have independent object A, independent object B, independent object C, all simultaneously doing their thing and settling as fast as they can, as fast as the network moves. So like that, like let's take an example of Aptos, because Aptos is, I would say, this is the key difference between Aptos and Sui. Like, yes, Aptos maybe has a parallelizable sequencer, but so it's able to settle, multiple things simultaneously. However, because it's account based, and because every other blockchain that is account based means that if I, although like, object, like smart contract A versus smart contract B versus smart contract C have technically nothing to do with each other, but they have to all wait on each other to finish because they're linked to my account. So they don't know. They can't act in silos. They have to. They don't know if you know they as fundamentally when it's account based, they will all have a shared kind of piece, which is me. Whereas when it's object oriented, they are truly independent. So like account based, you can never actually be independent. And so like in that way, like fundamentally, it has to go. Everything needs consensus.
And so is like,
And so you decouple. These things don't need consensus, and these things need consensus, and that allows for parallelization.
so for like Near and Ton, I'm not as familiar with those. I know like a lot of people from Near have actually moved to Sui, but like I'm not as familiar with those blockchains.
I'm not either, to be honest. So I know like both of them are not EVM. Ton is just like I don't know. It's a pretty janky thing. They did I don't know. There's like they have a weird funny language. I don't even know. It's like it's a weird language. They have like an EVM layer coming in, but I don't know. And then these are like not that impressively. I can't speak to specifics.
Yeah, we can't speak to specifics. I'm the adoption person. All I know is like a lot of people from Near have come over, and I don't know what's going on.
I think those are people that are like alt L1 curious, and so it makes sense that like they're more kind of open to seeing and exploring new things. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people from Solana rotating into Sui now, right? As an example, where they saw how much like Solana crushed on adoption. And then and they saw it was superior to EVM in terms of like execution, but then like so they see the same thing with Sui, and they see that window like, hey, it's early, but because it's like we call it like the third generation of smart contracts. Ethereum was like generation 1, Solana was generation 2, like so they're seeing that kind of is it all about liquidity? Then don't come to Sui. I don't think Sui is winning on liquidity. I think Solana is winning on liquidity right now. But yeah, I mean, actually, directionally, Sui is. I actually disagree.
That's actually not true.
That's not true anymore.
Yeah.
Well, when I made this decision, when we moved to Sui, that was not the case. It is definitely the case now, but like maybe that speaks for you, right? You want to go where you think the liquidity will go in the future, right? If you want to be,
if you have foresight, and you want to be rise with the tides. That's probably where to move.
So you're right. It is about liquidity. I mean, like liquidity is the lifeblood of a DeFi application. So,
I mean, to be honest, at the same time too, like liquidity will also go where it has the opportunity to make the most money.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Which is we actually built the most capital efficient DEX ever. It is modeling at we're not even talking about it, but like maybe we'll talk about it later. But our DEX is modeling at 200% the capital efficiency of Aerodrome on Base, which is currently the most profitable DEX in the world. It's actually a sustainable model. So for every dollar we spend, we make more than $1 back. So it's like actually not something you have to plan when to sell. We're patenting it and licensing it and copywriting it. So every other chain or ecosystem who's going to want a full sale is going to have to pay full sale holders for that. Sorry, our quant's calling us. Sorry, not the time, Ian. But yeah, so liquidity follows where it can make the most money. So as DeFi builders, the way we approach it is like, let's build the thing where people can make the most money, go to the place with the best tech, and just destroy it on adoption. And so that's kind of been our business model. So it depends. So yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the nice words.
Yeah.
Anything for Web3 Underground.
Yeah. It's like Sui I still think is like pretty raw in terms of its DeFi journey compared to other ecosystems. But you're seeing that as like it's starting to mature or get better, you'll start to see inflows of capital. But yeah, like she said, money flows where it's like makes more money.
Yeah.
So if you have a better design space to create infrastructure that is more useful and more profitable, like
I also just like depends on what magnitude of money we're talking about. Like I see like SUI and like after like talking with people like Christian Thompson and like our investor Adini, the co-founder, it's just like their connections, like as they're growing their SUI, which has scaled rapidly while we were here, we have taken a lot of pride onboarding a lot of people from Solana and other ecosystems as well. We're very competitive about adoption, but like SUI, their long-term vision is to be the Web3, is to be like a new internet. It's a full stack solution, and it's their, in the technical sense, they're leagues beyond every other blockchain in their offerings. So like, and that with their connections too, from like networking as executives at Meta, they have the business acumen and experience to actually hit at a global level. So again, there are less EVM devs than there are devs at Facebook, and so like if we're like talking about like the small change that is Web3 adoption right now, that's one thing. But if you're like looking at like like, do I want to be the main DEX, like the first capital efficient DEX of the blockchain that is going to be the next internet, then I'm thinking magnitudes greater than right now they have more money in that. Like, we're not looking at like cheap change for like quick grabs. We've created a long-term sustainable model to grow with our community and honestly change the narrative in DeFi, so that because what Full Sail ends up proving, and if you guys want, we can go into financial mechanics later. But what Full Sail ends up proving is that tokenization can be a more efficient engine of value accrual than equity. So that's kind of our perspective on things in terms of like scalability and stuff.
I love this HyperLiquid question. So let me go into the HyperLiquid. I think that's a good question to ask. So, like HyperLiquid is an example of a like product focused kind of like specialized, I guess, app chain. Here's the thing with HyperLiquid. It's like, great product market fit. All that stuff is there for sure. But it's like 16 validators, kind of closed source. And it's fine until it's not fine, right? Like if you're a security guy, are you going to deploy, millions of dollars of your capital or of your customers' capital into a platform where, if there's a higher rate of chance of a North Korean getting in and stealing it all. And it's just like, it's like a risk. It's a risk adjusted reward thing.
I think there's also going to be multiple winners. I think there's going to be other people. People.
No. I mean, it's winning until it gets hacked. That's what I'm saying, and maybe it will never get hacked, and that's a decent bet to make. But like there is that risk there, and that risk is mitigated. So like, okay, why does HyperLiquid exist on its own app chain? Right. Initially, the entry point was Arbitrum, and if Arbitrum had a robust enough stack, exactly. But if Arbitrum had a robust enough stack, right, like HyperLiquid would just be chilling on there, right? If HyperLiquid had designed from day one on SUI, which by the way, we're going to start seeing, one of the things that HyperLiquid had designed in its thing is that it's ability to, like have specific things in its consensus level that matches like that TradFi UX that like market makers expect. And that's tricky to implement in a general purpose L1. I think it's like cancellations and all that. But what's interesting is that there is a specific proposal coming on SUI that allows like such kind of concept, like that level of a perp exchange to be built on SUI. So if we're able to get a similar kind of user experience to HyperLiquid that market makers are seeking out on a general purpose chain, then you're going to go for that because that has that that will allow for higher like security and safety. Like it's only a matter of time before when a nation state cares about HyperLiquid that it can go and like knock on those 16 validators doors and like shut it down. And SUI still is pretty I would say SUI still has a little bit of that risk because it only has like 100 validators or so. But like you're seeing that like they're progressive. Yeah, it's progressive decentralization. So it's like, HyperLiquid also has like, it can progressively decentralize, and maybe it'll be fine. Hopefully it'll be fine. Obviously we want to root for things in our industry. But like, it has a ceiling to offer. Here's another thing that's funny about HyperLiquid is like, they're trying to create it into like this like ecosystem, but like the connectivity between Arbitrum and Hyper core is closer than the Hyper core and Hyper EVM layer, which is funny enough. So it's just like two kind of like somewhat decoupled things. Also, like, yeah, I'm the Miston team is insanely cracked when it comes to dev cycles and their ability to ship fast and iterate. Like, they already have things.
This guy's talking about the ZK login.
Yeah, we'll get into that as one of the features.
And also, what's the thing that you were really excited about that your friend built?
Yeah, we'll get into all those things. Like, we can, I guess, but like, yeah, ZK tunnels. And basically, there's a lot of things that like, being quantum proof, things like that like already, thinking ahead. But yeah, I mean, HyperLiquid, I think, is one of the best.
I hope there's a lot of winners, and I hope, and like, I think there will be, and that's great.
Yeah, it just comes down to
we need to like have healthy conversations about like what we need to improve and keep working on ourselves.
Yeah, it just comes down to like, ultimately, like, one of the things will be security as we mature as an industry. Like, right now, people are cool losing their money. I guess not cool, but like, they are tolerant of it. But that's not going to be the case when you still have continually reliable tech. Okay.
The best thing to do is like when people figure out full sale, and they can, like, you don't have to compromise yields or security.
Yeah, right. ETH pivot to the L2 narrative because like their L1 is obviously not capable enough to like facilitate all the things that is needed. So you have these centralized kind of L2s, or like, these kind of like this like weird middle ground, because like the L1 solidity is also not good for verified proofs. So they're like thinking of like upgrading that stack as well to like risk V and stuff. So they're in like that weird stage where they're trying to like keep up. But like, Sui got the benefit of like studying all these things before it, kind of like how Fulsa got the benefit of studying all these previous decentralized exchanges before us, and like learning what worked and what we can like improve on, and then starting out the gate with these better improvements.
You should talk about. I have to go.
Okay.
I have to, but like, you should talk to them about the ZK tunnels because you love that.
Yeah.
You'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. I have to go, but he's gonna stay. Obviously, he's the one who's more technical. What?
You talk to you.
Yeah, I'll go call. Thank you, guys. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yep.
All right. So let's go over the. All right. So we went over this. Okay, and then this other piece is pretty cool too, separating out the validator and the client, right? So the clients actually simulate and create the whole transaction. It's baked in, basically simulating. Sometimes in EVM they have like that. They have like certain toolings that you could use to like simulate transactions with like Tenderly and stuff. This is kind of just like baked in to all the clients that interact with Sui. So you'll know up front if the transaction will succeed. You don't have this thing where you keep pressing, like on Solana, you have to keep pressing to hope it goes through. And then validators, they don't have to like, build or guess. They can just simply verify and execute. And if it's independent, they don't even deal with consensus. If it's, so this kind of separation is really, really clean. Another huge improvement in their design choices. What that allows for is, again, faster finality. You don't have as much MEV, sub-second deterministic, which is pretty, great. Because the clients handle like, on their side, this allows for like the horizontal scaling piece. And then, the UX is easier because you'll know before you even try to submit a transaction whether it's going to go through or not. Which gives it a more Web2 like feel. And then, this allows for better auditing and stronger guarantees. So like, we're able to render things on the front end better. So you're able to like see, like when you're like, let's say when we're like popping it, it'll show in the wallet, like, hey, this is no good before you even click submit. So we've been talking about like look at some of the metrics on how Sui is doing compared to other ones. Like this throughput, latency is better. We're getting better transactions, cost. Solana is a crazy range, but like for the most part, Sui is cheaper. Parallel, and most other guys are partial, but like because of the object oriented, we're able to be fully parallelized in Sui. So less MEV and less exploits of security. Data speaks for itself. Shio project. Okay, I've heard. I don't have a deep enough. I'm not gonna have a deep enough opinion about this. I've seen it being talked back and forth. It seems like, from what I could tell from the community talking, like going into it, it is improvement. There was maybe some um, funny regression. I don't want to speak on it because I don't have enough deep opinion on it. So I'll pass on that one for now. But I saw like Aftermath guys were pretty happy about it because it improved their ability to push their decentralized perp. But yeah, I don't have enough opinion on it. Yeah, these are the metrics for why Sui's killing it, because of their stack and adoption now. And they have like really good tooling, right? We have like Walrus decentralized storage. We have DeepBook. DeepBook is definitely underrated. Now there's like this whole meta of like collabs, and so it's like, okay, we had AMMs, because AMMs allow like on-chain pricing of tokens being traded. But in traditional finance, right, like most of trading works on centralized limit order books. But as in the name, it's inherently centralized, and so we've had like these kind of weird versions of clubs until recently, but they all ultimately had some kind of centralized kind of component to it, which kind of like undermines the importance of like the blockchain. Like that means like something can be ordered unfairly, someone could be profiting in the middle, or a middleman profiting. And so DeepBook is the first truly on-chain order book, and it's been doing really well. But like yeah, it's like one of the like useful primitives on Sui. I think it's the first truly on-chain club, if I'm not mistaken. So Circle has native minting, which is nice. Sui name service, Sui play. These are all kind of things that Sui name service is similar to like the things we have in name services we have in other chains like something.sui. I think they're even extending it out to like be able to like plug into like SMS and like video chats and stuff. So you'll be able to use a Sui handle to have like end-to-end encrypted, privacy preserving communications, and social media. And then Sui Play is their gaming. So Sui actually originally started as a gaming company, gaming focused company, because gaming has a lot of demand. And then so you need like a really, really performant chain. And then I realized that they create such a performant chain that they're like, oh, wait a second. We can probably use this for DeFi and other things, other use cases as well. But they're pushing out this like Sui Play thing, I think sometime this year. So yeah, Move is all about security. What a topic issue that are leveraging it more than Sui. Yes, that's actually a good segue into talking about all these other toolings that Sui has that allows for applications to build more interesting things. So I think DeepBook is like a great example of this. It has again a truly on-chain order book. If there's a lot of trading activity on DeepBook, it does not affect other projects. I think Sui, honestly, Sui is still so early. It's only been a couple of years, but it has this amazing design space, but there's such an opportunity for things to be built, that it's like, it's like a green field. There is like a couple of like truly on-chain perp exchanges that are starting to come out. Bluefin just launched like their pro version of perps exchange. It uses this combination of like on-chain transaction, but it uses like this Nautilus piece, which is like off-chain computation in a TEE, right, trusted execution environment. So it kind of keeps like, it preserves like privacy of. So here's another thing on HyperLiquid, right? Like HyperLiquid, you can see these large trades, right? Like I don't know if you saw like James Wynn, right? Like the $1 billion long position on Bitcoin, who got hunted down and liquidated. And so like all these like things are visible. So now imagine like you can have like a like a perp, but like you can't. But it's you can't see people can't see your trade, you can't see other people's trade, but it's verifiably true, and there is no one on the inside that has disadvantaged insight, right? Like central exchanges that are perps, right? Like those guys can actually see trades and probably are front running you, and you have no idea what's going on because it's all black box. But like all this like tooling that Sui has allows a flexibility of like you can even have like these off chain pieces. Uh, Another example of a project, actually, I can go into Ika. Ika is like a huge, successful Israeli company that just launched like a week ago. We're Full Sail is hosting their token. This is like an example of like a very very competent like cracked team that basically created this novel like threshold secure cryptography scheme that allows like a decentralized management of private key access. I have a later slide on this, but I'm just answering Amit's question. I think, and so they chose to build on Sui because Sui is object oriented, and that allows objects to manage private key access. What does that mean? That means that like you have private key that touches, like private key means a wallet that that accesses assets on many chains, many networks, right? You might have a wallet for Bitcoin, wallet for Ethereum, so on and so forth. And so right now, if you want to like you do cross-chain things, or like if I'm sitting in Ethereum and I want to manage assets on Solana, I have to either like bridge those assets over, or I have to send like a message through like a cross-chain bridging system. I don't know, like things like XLR or Layer 0 and stuff. Those guys, if you're a smart contract on chain A and you want to call a function on a smart contract on chain B, right? You have to send this message across. As you're sending this message across, you're actually like saying you want to do. You're kind of like giving your permission to like the messaging kind of layer in the middle, and you're kind of trusting them to go. Now they have full authority to sign on your behalf, and they can go in and technically they could, if the validators or whatever of the middleman choose to change what they call on chain B, they can change the function and do something else crazy, which is a very like risky situation, which is why this fragmented UX that we have across chains is there. And so Ika is a great example of a platform that chose to build on Sui because of its like object centric system. There, these guys are like security gigabrains, and the objects on Sui are able to manage any asset or anything essentially on any other network by managing the private key access. And that private key access is still shared. Ultimately, it cannot do anything without your permission. So you have to either sign handing over permission to this object to manage on your behalf, or you could choose to like sign on every transaction always. So like it can never do a transaction that you didn't choose to do. That leads to a very clean UX of like Sui basically managing all other chains and all other activities on their chains from one single kind of entry point, and without compromising kind of trust and handing off signing abilities that you didn't choose to. So I think that's a very cool, and that literally just launched like I don't know, like a week or two ago. So like it's so early that there's such an amazing design space. Walrus launched like a few months ago. It's like leagues beyond things like Filecoin and like IPFS and all these kind of existing. Even does like better data availability than like things like Celestia and all. So and like with Walrus, you can build like all these like like decentralized versions of cloud systems like Google Drive and email systems and all that. So like again, the tooling is here now to literally build all of Web 2 again in Web 3 without like with the appeals of what Web 3 provides, right? Like tokenization, decentralization, censorship, whatever things you want to get out, like the Web3 benefits that you want. And again, and most of the stuff is not built, so this is a full greenfield, and hopefully some of you guys get into it. Yeah, so it's like these things are pretty neat. As I mentioned already, Nautilus is like off-chain TE, and that's kind of there baked in to use. Seal is really nice because it's like kind of like the Web3 version of OAuth, and it's decentralized, and you're able to have privacy. So it's like I'm able to use like similar Web2 type creds, SSO and things like that to do Web3 actions. So it's like a nice improvement on wallet. Same thing, similarly ZK login. I think someone mentioned that, right? Like that allows you don't even need like this wallet UX, using like ZK proofs, plugs in nicely into your Web2 creds. So all this good stuff, it really gives the tooling that Web2 devs are used to, and they like feel like Web3 is like pretty, bare bones, but now it's not even the case anymore. Right, so Ika touched on, and so an example of like the thing that Ika unlocks is like there's another project called Native, and there's been this whole like Bitcoin finance, Bitcoin Fi kind of narrative of all these like L2s that are being built on Bitcoin. But you know what's the best Bitcoin L2? It's actually Sui, via Ika. Sui Ika combo allows people to manage. So Bitcoiners, their biggest thing, and why is all this Bitcoin liquidity not got into DeFi? We've had WBTC for a while. Funny enough, on Arbitrum, WBTC, like the biggest project protocol on Arbitrum was GMX. It's like this perps exchange, and the most liquid token on there is WBTC. So we're sitting on a layer 2 on Ethereum, and the most liquid and the biggest app's most liquid token is Bitcoin. So like, as you can tell, like, people that wanted to like do DeFi with Bitcoin have already been doing that through like things like WBTC. And there's a whole like, field of L2s that popped up, and then there's all these other like, like Babylon and so many different these things. But they all have this like fundamental dilemma, which is that Bitcoiners are not like true Bitcoiners don't want to move their liquidity. They don't want to bridge their Bitcoin. They don't want to like reduce any of the trust assumptions. They don't want to compromise in any way. They don't want to wrap it. They don't want to create synthetics version of their Bitcoin. They don't want a custodial version, like WBTC has like a custodian, and so that compromises that ethos. But with Ika and Sui, like your Bitcoin literally stays on the Bitcoin network. You don't have to bridge it or wrap it. It's just that like your private key access to your Bitcoin can now be managed in Sui. So this is really cool. And it's a project that's like onboarding like Bitcoin, so it's easier to manage this kind of Bitcoin natively on Sui. Makes sense. They're called native. And so we'll be able to do this with basically all assets on all networks. And so if you have like this elite Sui consensus through like object-oriented and parallelization and all these fun things, and now I can use that to manage all these other kind of digital assets that are like relics of older networks, right? Like these like stable coins and all these things that have been already materialized in previous networks. Like I guess like how you have tech debt, you have financial debt, I guess. They have all these assets that are sitting in these other networks. And so, you can now manage them without having to do any kind of execution on those chains. You can just do all the execution on Sui and not have to worry about trust and stuff. So you can see like it's about to go parabolic on all the things we can do with Sui. And it's very early now. And Bitcoin's a big example of that. Cool. I think before we switch over to the financial side, is there any other questions or anything on the Sui, and why Sui? Why I'm excited about building on Sui. I'm gonna go over like some of the financial engineering side of this now. And I'll keep it shorter, much shorter than the Sui side. Cool. All right. So so like that's why I chose to build on Sui, because like we're seeing where the tech is going. It's very evident. Even now, liquidity in the market's like proving it out. Great. So Sui is definitely where we're going to build. Now it's like what are we building? What are we doing? Like DeFi is only a few years old. Like really, DeFi summer 2020 is really when it took off, right? And we still have like these like important kind of giants that started like these key primitives like Uniswap for AMMs. We should have like Aave for lending and stuff like that. But if you think what's interesting about like something like a Uniswap is like it has like so much liquidity that it's all this volume that is generated, but how much of the trading fees that Uniswap has created accrues back to the Uni token. That's the thing that's like people that like kind of map TradFi to crypto. They are used to operating in this paradigm that like in the TradFi world you have stocks, and stocks like, or shares of a company, right? A company has a profit and loss statement. That profit accrues to the balance sheet, and a stock is a piece of that balance sheet. So that value accrual is clearly defined and is like baked in to how kind of our traditional finance corporate systems have been structured. But in the tokenized like crypto world, you have a more flexible design space for how value accrues from like the project's kind of financial performance into the token, right? So in the case of Uniswap, you didn't even have all this fees you generated. They like had this like they decoupled some of the value accrues to Uni Labs, or they just keep it in their treasury. But it's like Uni is kind of a meme coin. There isn't actually explicitly any of the profit being generated by the protocol directly accruing back to the Uni token. The Uni token is just for governance, with quotes around it, because there is no clear direct value accrual being defined that's defined that goes back to that token. So that's basically where we come up with this kind of principle where we use to like analyze tokens across any protocol, it can be exchange, it can be an L1, it can be whatever. We call it return on emissions, ROE. And it's quite simple. How much value is accruing back to the token holders versus the cost of the token being emitted, right? So, this is basically fees generated divided by net cost of emissions, in both normalized to the dollar value. So this is kind of the kind of principle. Like if something has a greater than 100% ROE, it means that it's going to be long-term sustainable. If it has a negative, if it has less than 100% ROE, it means that it's like over time it's inflationary and more it's diluting existing holders. It might not be obvious immediately because there's like all these other kind of dynamics like market volatility, speculative, upside and downside, that kind of bias. But the fundamental level, the token is losing value from a financial level, and that is not like if it's less than 100% ROE, I call them slow rugs, basically. But we don't really think about that in crypto yet, because like you can see left and right, it's pretty chaotic in terms of projects launching at very high FTVs, trying to do like supply control kind of mechanics, a lot of market maker and activity, this and that. It's like, and it's all there to prop up the thing. But if you fundamentally look at what the ROE metric is, it'll give you visibility into how long sustainable this is. Sometimes you do need to have a negative ROE if you're in a rapid growth phase, like but ultimately, if you want to last a very long time, you have to get to a greater than 100% ROE. That's kind of our viewpoint, if that's our opinion. So with that principle, we looked at, when we were building Full Sail, we looked at all these exchanges and we kind of studied their ROE. And so let's take the market leader, in exchanges, or one of the market leaders, Aerodrome. They're like this famous, VE33 style exchange on Base. And these are a bunch of other actual VE33s, and actually Pancake's not a VE33, but like is another, exchange that you think is doing quite well. But when you actually look at the ROEs, it's really a different story, right? It's like Aerodrome, for every dollar that it's printing in tokens, it's earning back 25 cents in fees. So basically, it's inflating its supply every week. It's printing new tokens, but the amount of money that the protocol is earning is far less. So, what happens is they have mechanics that you lock up the token and this and that. But ultimately, that circulating supply is growing really fast at a really inflationary rate. And, how sustainable that is, I say, in our view, like we say the wheels will eventually fall off unless it leads to, the ROE crosses back. Which, what's cool is if you look at this chart of progressively over time, you can see this gray line is airdrome, and you can see that it is starting to go improve over time. But it's been like what, like almost 2 years now, and it's never been above 100%. So it's been a very expensive initial. They were very inflationary in the beginning, early days, and so like now they're kind of paying the price, and that's like why it's like and this is like considering the fact that they have a lot of support from Coinbase. Like, Coinbase is a marginal buyer. They help kind of, they're gonna keep bootstrapping airdrome. It's kind of they have that like really close relationship, so it's like a more strategic thing. But like Coinbase is paying a lot of money to like prop this up. Based on the financial mechanics here, they're basically knowing that it's inflationary, still kind of putting a lot of buy pressure. Anyways, that's a unique scenario. If you look at other 3-3s, they haven't worked. Pharaoh is another example of a close relationship with Avalanche Foundation, who is a huge marginal buyer. And so they're the only one that I would say is like, hey, this one looks like pretty sustainable. If Avalanche continues this activity that they have been, then like, yeah, Pharaoh is going to keep chugging along really well. The rest of them are going to keep deteriorating in fundamental value accrual because they're over less than 100% ROE. And so, it's like, hey, how do you build an exchange that, sustainably has over 100% return on emissions, where, obviously it's helpful to have the foundation support you, but you shouldn't, like, that shouldn't be your crux. And the best way to do that is kind of like break apart all the kind of things that make these exchanges, their mechanics, see which mechanics create, like, have a high impact on ROE, which mechanics have a low impact, like have a really negative impact. Just one easy example is like, okay, why did it start increasing steadily? Here specifically, Aerodrome introduced concentrated liquidity in their AMM, which is a drastically more efficient way of trading assets, right? Like it's like Uni V2 versus Uni V3, right? The V3 is drastically more efficient. Like, there's much less idle capital sitting around. And they also had another kind of improvement where they had dynamic fees. So this means that, like, the price for which the assets trade is not constant. That means when there's a high amount of volume of an asset of trading volume, that there should, like, the pricing goes up, and when there's very low volume, then the price goes down. That allows for like you to be like this AMM to be the more preferred route for trading activity that's picked up by other aggregators and such. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of like over the evolution of AMMs, right? I touched on Uniswap, and I touched on how Uni token is basically a meme coin because there is no explicit value accruing from the protocol into the token. Then we had after and also another issue with Uniswap is that if I'm trying to, let's say I create a new token and I want to, like, deploy on Uniswap, I want to create price discovery for my token. I need to have a bunch of my tokens, but then I also need to source liquidity for the counterparty, right? Whether it's a bunch of ETH liquidity, a bunch of stablecoin liquidity, whatever the counterparty I want to use. But it's very expensive to, like, source all that liquidity, so enough liquidity to pair against my token to service like the demand of volume that's there. And so that was a really kind of it was very difficult for token issuers to kind of, like, seed their pools. They had to, like, source that capital. It was expensive for them. And that's when SushiSwap came around, and there was an infamous vampire attack. And so what Sushi did was like, they're like, hey, what if we emit our governance token Sushi as a reward token, like help token those guys that are going to seed their pools. What if we incentivize liquidity to come in? So now that onus is not on the token issuer to source the counterparty liquidity. You can actually source that liquidity from the market. And that's where we get into, you see these APRs and incentives for liquidity providers. That's on top of the trading fees. So SushiSwap was like one of the first guys to do that with their own governance token as a incentive to bring onboard liquidity. However, the Sushi token, doesn't really have, especially in the beginning, didn't really have much kind of value accrual. If so like people would just purchase, receive these Sushi tokens and just sell them and just keep dumping them. And so you have this like highly inflationary token that has a lot of sell pressure. So as you can say, that didn't really have that didn't help, its price action. They did add like a kind of a rev share model, which meant okay, so some of the fees that the platform earns goes to Sushi holders, but the ROE was in like the teens, right? So like that, it's very similar to Pancake, actually, quite similar to Pancake, the mechanic of Sushi. And so it has a similar kind of ROE. And that's why Sushi is not like a leading DEX. You don't really, but it was a huge innovation at the time. And then even Uniswap kind of started doing that as well. So it kind of like, depleted. Then Andre Cronje, the famous, this famous like DeFi guy from back in DeFi summer, he was big on Phantom. Phantom was this chain that was like DeFi focused. Name is fitting because it's kind of a ghost chain now. But he created something called Solidly, which is a really neat innovation at the time. It was basically taking inspiration from. Maybe let me take a step back into Curve real quick before I go into Solidly. So Curve came out after like SushiSwap, and and the Curve model is kind of like instead of giving out rewards that can be instantly dumped, what if you give out what if you have this interesting kind of relationship between liquidity providers, token holders, and traders, where instead of just the relationship between liquidity providers and token holders, where liquidity providers and token holders, where the token is just liquidity providers and traders, where the trading fees are just simply given to liquidity providers. What if you give the trading fees to token holders, and the token holders then choose inform how the token emissions are given to liquidity providers. So you have this kind of trifecta. And in the Curve case, they created this concept of vote escrow. So you basically have more voting power and you earn more fees based on how long you lock up the tokens. So that kind of helps mitigate a lot of the sell pressure, because a lot of the tokens are then locked up and taken out of circulating supply. So these mechanics definitely improved ROE for sure. But ultimately, in the case of Curve, and this extends to the case with like future similar exchanges, is that the rate at which they're printing new tokens is not consistent with how much fees the protocol is making. So, if you have a fixed emissions curve, meaning like you are printing a certain amount of tokens every week, regardless of market conditions, that's fine when you're in a bull market. You're like, there's a lot of trading activity. It overshadows like the dilution of your tokens being emitted. But in a bear market, you don't need to emit as many tokens, but you're emitting against your fixed predefined curve, the same tokens that you had defined, then the fee generation is a lot less. So now the supply is getting diluted, and the ROE drops quite a bit. And that was kind of like one of the big problems that we saw with Curve. We see with error. Solidly was like the first VE33, which took elements from Curve and took elements from like what you call Ohm, like the 3-3 concept, which I can get into, but I'll move a little bit faster, I guess. And so like you have like Solidly, you had like Aerodrome, Velodrome. These are all VE33s that kind of all are exposed to this like hyperinflation long term. And so if you take that ROE principle and you kind of apply to all the mechanics, you are able to then figure out, hey, one of the biggest issues is emissions. Needs to be in sync with how much fees a protocol is generating. An exchange's fee generation is based on how much volume it's generating. So, you need to emit less tokens when there's less volume and emit more tokens when there's more volume. Okay, great. And that's kind of like the kind of basis for Full Sail. It's the first exchange that has a responsive emissions curve to like volume while keeping all these things intact of like the relationship between liquidity providers, traders, and token holders. That was so successful in like the previous VE33 models. And based on this, our projections show that we're twice as capital efficient, right? Like this blue line is, and this orange and blue is like how we see our models. And we took like very conservative assumptions does against other existing exchanges. And we're about to like launch, I guess, in a couple of weeks. So we'll see how this proves out. Again, just reiterating on like how the Uniswaps and the early sushi swaps, pancake swaps, they're capital inefficient because they have a lot of stagnant liquidity. Less than 10% of the TVL is actually utilized. So inherently, that's going to create like inefficiencies. Again, they're like reward tokens are constantly sold because there's no utility to those tokens, which means that there's always sell pressure. And if this is the best exchange that exists in your ecosystem, then you don't perform as well. And ecosystems that have more efficient exchanges will suck in more liquidity. So our bet is that if we create the most efficient exchange model, prove it out, and we build it on the most tech efficient ecosystem, which is SUI and ICA, then not only are we going to win our ecosystem market, we're going to win the overall kind of DeFi and then ultimately TradFi market. That is kind of the bet that we take. And so what's crazy also about it is like, let's go into airdrops for a quick second. Whether it's HyperLiquid, whether it's even like that, and that's considered one of the better examples of airdrops, or most protocols where airdrops like don't are not like done like don't maybe not as successful. Doesn't matter. In all cases, if you run the numbers, we've seen that airdrops has a very low return. Like you're putting out a bunch of these tokens, and the market usually just dumps them, regardless of whether you think it's helping on the user acquisition side. It doesn't lead to long-term sustainable users. The data shows like less than 10%. So for every dollar of like token you're distributing through airdrop, it has like statistically shown less than 10 cents of benefit of fees earned, which is crazy. And then you have like exchanges that like airdrop for up to 40% of their supply. No wonder they're dealing with inflation now down the road. I touched on emissions being responsive to market conditions, and and also you don't want to have like spikes in activity. So like in a lot of these like exchange model concepts, they have, let's say, 4-year lockups, and a lot of the tokens unlock at the same time. And the problem there is just that it creates a spike of sell pressure. If a lot of things, if there's a lot of like, if the circulating supply like has a stepwise like increase in float, then like that leads to like suddenly a lot of tokens in the which can potentially create a lot of sell pressure. So you have to kind of like think about all these things to keep like sustainability, because like you want to have efficiency, but you also want to have reduced volatility. And so for that, like we have like a chunk of our fees go into an insurance fund. That insurance fund, actually, HyperLiquid does this pretty well. They have an HLP vault, right? That like kind of market makes their liquidity. And so if like there's like like they list a token that has more volatility, their HLP comes in and makes trades that maybe like like the traders in the market might not make, and that kind of balances the open interest on that platform a bit more. So we kind of took that kind of idea there. And so like in Full Sail, basically we take our liquidity pools and turn them into prediction markets, and this comes from the idea of wisdom of crowds. And that's the aspect that like, if you like, it comes from this like famous example. If like 100 people look at a cow and try to guess its weight, there's independently, they're actually surprisingly accurate to the real result. I don't know, it's like this fascinating phenomenon, and a lot of research has been done on it. So wisdom of crowds is extremely, crowdsourcing information is extremely, I mean, we see this in prediction market, right? Like literally Goldman Sachs is like using Polymarket to like price like oil and stuff, because they're based on certain things, or like how the US election, or a lot of these elections, you can actually tell from Polymarket who's going to win way before the polls tell you. So let's use it in a DeFi native way. And so, in our thing, it's like, hey, how do we know how to know how much tokens to emit next week? What if we ask our community, basically our token holders, to predict the volumes of the pools, and we aggregate all this prediction data, and we use that partially 50% weight to this prediction data and 50% to historical efficiency of that pool, and we take that to determine how much to emit into that pool, and then based on how well you predict, you get a higher payout from the trading fees. So this is like way more instead of in like the VE33 where the flywheel kind of it kind of trails the volume that's needed. So when there's more volume, it creates a demand for more bribes, and then liquidity flows in after the volume is needed. This proactively supplies liquidity where it's needed before, in anticipation of that volume. So that's a huge kind of insight and efficiency gain that we realized. And then we have like a lot of mechanics. Like if you exit our ecosystem, you have to pay a penalty. If you stay long term, you're rewarded extra. So there's a bunch of pieces like that baked in. Like for instance, our liquidity providers receive an option token called OSAIL, and if they decide to take that OSAIL and stake it into VE sale, they keep all of the underlying sale. But if they take that OSAIL and decide they want to get their rewards and exit our system, then they have to pay an exercise fee that goes to existing long-term holders. So these long-term holders are earning all these fees from the trading fees as well as all these fees from people leaving our ecosystem. So basically that nudges everyone to kind of stay long-term. And so and then things like dynamic fees, concentrated liquidity, we saw that these had huge improvements in ROE in other exchanges. So having that out the gate is very critical to make sure that you minimize how much idle capital is there. Plus incentivizing this liquidity very accurately because of a dynamic emissions curve. So having a really good exchange is absolutely essential to ecosystem. So when I was building all this stuff in Arbitrum in 2021, 22 it was at the home of retail DeFi. You see all these innovative primitives being built there. But then when I started looking at Sui, I'm like, man, you have a few copycat lending and exchange protocols. We had a version of Sushi Swap there called Cetus. But they're if you actually build proper financial plumbing there, that's more innovative and more useful and more efficient, more profitable than anywhere else. You know how someone asked how you go where the liquidity is? What if you build something so useful that it draws in the liquidity? And in fact, you can only build something if you build something that's only possible in that ecosystem that can't build anywhere else, then it's kind of a wrap, right? So we're able to build an AMM. We're able to use Nautilus for keeping some of our kind of reward, the reward calculation and distribution. We do that in a TEE. We want to do that, with a TEE in Nautilus. So that keeps that makes it verifiable. That our reward is honest. That the algorithm we're using is honest. Same thing with our dynamic fee. We have an algorithm that's run, that we run in a verifiable way, so it's honest. It gives us the composability to keep changing that. If you want that price, the dynamic fee algorithm. But once we define that algorithm and the community signs off on it, then it's implemented in that exact way. It's verified. Or if you want to, for instance, use if you want to keep independent predictions, we were able to use Seal, and that allows people to submit their volume predictions. They can't see each other's volume predictions until the epoch ends, and then the results are revealed. So that's we can't do that anywhere else. We can only do that in Sui. Or if you want to manage assets, Bitcoin natively, we want to manage Sol native. We want to manage let's say, I don't know, Pump. We want to manage Hype, right? You want to manage any of these assets. We don't have to think about how to bridge those assets over. We can actually manage people's private key access to those assets through Eka. And so our AMM, that you just have to build this AMM once really well on Sui, and with other tooling, we're able to manage all digital assets everywhere. in this one single AMM contract. So that's like why we're really excited that like if you build, and there's just so much stuff to build right now. It's like Sui and Nika and all this is super early. So if you guys like have interesting ideas, like there isn't that much competition, and like kind of like first mover advantage is kind of real in crypto, as long as you think about, and then after that, if you make sure to do like think about sustainability and proper financial engineering and tokenomics up front, then you kind of like, and you have an advantage on a product offering side, then you have a pretty good moat. And so that's why we're bullish on Sui. We think this is why we think DeFi is going to win on Sui, and that's why we're excited building Full Sail, and we're going to TGE in a couple of weeks, and excited to see our mechanics be proved out. So yeah, that's it. Happy to answer any other questions, I guess.
Well, thank you so much. If there's any questions from the audience, feel free to ask in the chat or raise your hand and we will let you open the mic. Let's give them another moment. And if not, some closing remarks. So I think there were enough questions. So I have some questions. More about you, and if you want to speak for Bonnie as well, feel free to speak for her as well. But how did you get into the, let's say, to the ecosystem or to blockchain in general?
Yeah. So different levels, right? I first came across Bitcoin in 2013, just doing distributed computing stuff in college. But I was just like, messing around. I held some of the stuff. And this is pretty neat. But I became more obsessed when Ethereum came around, because like now you can actually build cool concepts on chain, right? So like that was, and then I became a full-time builder in DeFi summer by building, when I realized, hey, like I saw this really cool project called Alchemix, which allowed you to have like self-repaying loans without liquidations. So basically I could put like my assets like Ethereum and stable coins into earning yield. But I could actually then kind of use that to leverage against kind of like a CDO that have in TradFi, we call it CDPs, like MakerDAO is an example, right? Where you use collateral and you're able to mint this new like primitive synthetic token that keeps like kind of a peg. So the challenge with the MakerDAO version is like, right, you have to worry about liquidations because like there's difference in pricing. In our version, like, if you mint an in-kind asset, so if you're minting a synthetic ETH against a yield-bearing ETH, you have that position. You have more capital efficiency, and the yield from that underlying asset pays down your debt. So and we did that with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stable. That was really, really a great proof of concept. But I learned the hard way the importance of distribution. I was a CTO on that, like it worked like a charm. But like we were in the deep in the bear. Also, like we improved on the tokenomics of Alchemix, but and that's when I actually met my quants that I'm working with here. These guys like ran up, they advised Sushi, like they built up like Apex on for example on Binance that ran up to like 700 mil plus TVL, and so like we've seen like they've seen TVL scale up like crazy, but how to keep that TVL is actually the game. It's not hard to scale up. It's how do you sustain? That's like what we've been thinking. And so like, they're helping me trying to like salvage that project because I messed up the tokenomics in the beginning and it was like an uphill battle. So, learned a lot from that. We eventually had to wind it down. We paid off all our users and made everyone whole. But that whole journey, AirTX, who's like a lead dev in the Sui ecosystem, he runs this project called Aftermath. He saw what I was building. We became friends. And then he was like, teaching me about Sui. And I'm like, bro, like this is amazing, cracked technology. There is no DeFi culture here. There is no DeFi ecosystem here. We need basic financial plumbing. And so that, there's two ways of looking at that. One is like, oh, if there's nothing here, that means something wrong with this. Or, oh, this is an opportunity in greenfield to build out all these primitives that are necessary. because you need to have strong financial kind of backbone in order to build like the next level of application, right? Someone said like, how can I build if there's no liquidity, right? So you have to solve for that liquidity coming in a way that's used in a, and then that, so we started like we're studying existing exchanges because like we need a better exchange here. And as we're studying it, we're like, wait a second, we can build an improved model, which we think, we've designed. And, now it's like kind of blossomed into like, one of Sui's upcoming exciting projects, like the founders of Sui Foundation, where we went through the Aftermath incubator. So we have like a really good like support. We're like part of the culture. In fact, I feel like we're shaping some of the culture because it's still early, and anyone gets involved now is still so early. It's like, like Solana has like a whole cycle on Sui, right? Sui's only been 2 years old, and now look at like the ecosystem in Solana. So like if you kind of extend that way for Sui, it's like, hey, there's like it'll keep blossoming, and now instead of having just copycat DeFi primitives being there, now we potentially are starting to have like innovations that can only actually be built with Sui tech. You can't it's actually a blessing and a curse that you have to write everything from scratch. You can't just like fork things, which then forces the mind to start thinking how to innovate, right? So that's also a good thing. But then also the tooling is pretty raw. So, there's still plenty of work. I'll give you the last thing. I'll give you the devil advocate side of Sui. One major thing is like, the validator set is still pretty centralized. If you're a true kind of DeFi person or like a crypto person, you really think of like credibly neutral ledger systems, right? But then what I say is like, it's all about progressive decentralization, right? Are you trending towards more and more your Nakamoto coefficient increasing? Because in the beginning, if you decentralize too much and then something happens, like in Ethereum, if like we let the DAO hack happen and just like, I don't know if Ethereum would have like existed today, right? And so we had a similar scenario with Sui where our biggest exchange here, Cetus, got hacked, and they were able to the validators were able to socially coordinate and prevent most of that liquidity from being stolen. And if they didn't do that, I think Sui would have had a huge step back in liquidity and users and stuff. But because they're able to salvage it, now they have better. In fact, what's really cool is the Sui Foundation gives a whole checklist of security conditions that we had to meet. I gave them a lot of feedback on improving like the financial side. Like we have audits for contracts, but we don't have audits for financial engineering, which I think is like one of the biggest problems in this space. But anyways, like we have like a lot of these kind of like practices now in Sui. It makes it more accessible for like these like security minded, serious money tradfi institutions. They can't fathom like a hack. Like that's ridiculous. Like you can't have that be priced in to your operations. Anyways.
Awesome. So I have another few questions. These are more personal questions. So if you'll give us one tip that you think made your journey much better in this space, what would it be?
Especially when I was onboarding into like becoming a full-time builder. I don't do this as much now, but like in the first year, 2 years, I went to like, I don't know, 15, 20 conferences. And it's not just about like, it's about that way you're able to speed run and not just your networking, but also it's a lot easier to just go up to people and ask them questions and like act like a student. Like I never think things, like, like the smartest people are the ones that realize they know nothing, right? Like the more you learn something, the more you realize you don't know anything. And so like having that mindset and constantly meeting people, and you're able to speed run your ability to like, I was able to build an amazing, so I have like a really cracked devs, quants, marketing, and all this is just because of like that ability to build that network. So that was really, really valuable. And I'm someone who's an introvert, dev kind of focused. So like, it's like, yeah, to really put myself out of my comfort zone, but that made my life way easier and way faster to figure out opportunities and build stuff. Yeah, it's underappreciated, but a lot of people just go to conferences just to like, I don't know, do weird, like just hang out and party. And like, it's more so like just trying to talk to people and ask questions and learn as much as you can, especially when you're like newer.
It's great advice. Thank you. And maybe the one last question. So what is your favorite thing in what you do today, or the least favorite thing in what you do today?
Favorite thing is just like, it's like there is no like textbook on tokenomics, right? Or like, any of this. And so like you're going around talking about like things that seem really obvious to you, but it's because it's so new. that like it'll take time for people to like realize these things by perhaps being burnt. And we are as an industry learning and getting iterating. But because it's just like it's only been a few years that we're like some of these ideas and things have only been tested on the specifically on the tokenomics side, I would say financial engineering side. That it's like, you know, it's really cool to kind of like let's get away from like, you know, like know that a meme coin is not sustainable. I think people are starting to realize that. Or like, how do you risk analyze that a token will last in value, like looking at ROE. So that I love like talking about that stuff and geeking out on that stuff. And you know, as you can tell, I'm also just like I'm very sweet pilled, so I'm constantly going around trying to onboard. You know, in fact, I don't even try to onboard EVM people, or there's like this real level of tribalism that once people have like are emotionally invested or like financially invested in something, they only want to like, you know, they have a tendency to like shill their bags or like stick to the thing. So I'm more interested in onboarding fresh devs, people that are not in crypto, actually into Sui, because they're used to Web2. They see, you know, that it's actually that's where those two things I would say.
Okay, and I have one more question I want to ask if you still have some time. So what is one mistake or error you would, let's say, you would want our community to try and avoid, or something that you think developers in the space should try and notice more?
Yeah. So TGE is absolutely essential, but there is like some false conception, and there's some like things that are so like for instance, we're going to be going all of us into a war room for like a week or 2 weeks, like all sitting in front of a computer when we launch our token, and because you really like that is like the most kind of vulnerable stage of a project, right? That makes sense. But here's the thing that I think is a misconception. I think paying central exchanges and paying market makers is a waste of money. Like absolute waste of money. What matters more is fundamentally designing the value accrual of your token. Like that matters more. Like actually designing the token to sustain value instead of paying people to prop it up temporarily. So, you know, like it's more about having a checklist in place of like, okay, you know, are we on Dex Screener? Are we on this? Is all our security things in place? Are we do dry runs over and over again of you know, integration testing, dry runs on testnet of like your flow, making sure your OPSEC is in place, make sure all your team's OPSEC is in place, you know, make sure North Koreans can't get to you, right? I make everyone I hired say like, fuck you, Kim Jong-un, so that I know they're not North Korean. Like, so this kind of checklist. So like the token generation event is super critical.
Yeah, it's kind of preposterous to like it's gonna be so funny to think now, like in like a few years, be like, I can't believe there used to be airdrops. You know, like could you imagine a company with value in its equity just giving it away? You know,
like getting free.
Like, that's crazy. And then like the fact that like, and then imagine like if you didn't have such poor value accrual to your equity that you had to pay external people to make your equity make sense.
Yeah, like
instead of just like designing it to have a relationship with like your company's success, you know. And so that's like this is the relationship between like protocol rich token poor protocols and like what Fulsa is doing, which is just like proving that tokenization can be a more efficient form of value accrual than equity.
It's like if Figma just IPO'd, imagine just giving out a bunch of Figma equity to a bunch of Figma users. Like, that seems hilarious, but why is it a thing Web3?
Well, yeah, as a user, it might be nice, but yeah.
For short-term users, it's nice, but for long-term users or long-term people bullish on Figma, they're like, shit. Well, everyone's going to sell. These people are going to sell their equity, and like the price of Figma is going to go down.
And honestly, from the people who own the thing, it's like, why would I want to sell my Figma? Like, I'm going to own my Figma. It's going to make me more money. This is not the, so that's another perspective.
Also, the data speaks for itself. You actually, if you analyze any airdrop and you see its effect, you see like there's a high rate of sell pressure, and it doesn't translate into. And there is some things that are gray area. Like it's not black and white. Like there is like a loyal like community for HyperLiquid. I think that's a really interesting like positive. Yeah. Or like Blur had a good example, but like it's like still it's like, you know, yeah. Anyways, we in our data we have like less than 10% return. So even if there is like loyalty, it's like, okay, great, we're up to maybe 20%. That's still like below 100, like by a long mile.
Awesome. So I'm out of question. I do have more questions to ask, but I'm out of written questions at least. So thank you so much, both of you, Bonnie as well, if you can hear me. Thank you so much, and Glupta, it was wonderful. I'll take the chance to say thank you to all the participants who joined us today. Please help us grow a little bit the community and follow us on X and other social media. It will help a lot. We're a nonprofit, and all we're doing is by dev for devs. So we'll appreciate each and every one of you.
Say hi to our
Yeah,
lead dev.
so-
This is our
Hi.
lead. This is, and she's in charge of HR.
Oh, wow. I have one of those in my physics course. Anyways, so we have another event in the 27th. I would invite all of you, but in Glupta as well. You're always invited, and thank you for joining us today. And for the rest, everything is on our website at Web3 Devs Underground. We will also update for future events there. And you can also apply to speak at one of our events. And I think that's mostly. So if you want to take an active part in the community or speak in one of our next events, just reach out to any of our community managers or through the website. And thank you. We would love to see all of you next time.
Yeah, we'd love. We'll all meet up in Israel sometime.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Thank you
So
for having
thank you,
us.
everyone. And yeah, see you next time.
Bye bye. Actually.